See, Harry, I've searched and searched for something. Some small detail.
When we first discovered Harry Potter, we were totally surprised by all of the unbelievable twists and turns from start to finish. But it turns out that they were actually dropping tons of hints about what was to come, long before anything really happened. Like, how about the fact that Snape was working with Dumbledore all along? We had no idea, but looking back, there were so many clues. Today we're checking out all of the foreshadowing that we totally missed in Harry Potter.
No one can know.
Per Snape. We were never totally sure where his loyalties lay, but it turns out that we missed a million clues that he was one of the good guys all along. If you watch closely, he tries to protect Harry in almost every movie in tiny, subtle, deliberately hidden ways, like teaching him his most useful spell,
Expelliarmus!
to confronting Professor Quirrell on Harry's behalf, to taking out the Carrows during his duel with Professor McGonagall, and so many more.
But Hagrid, how am I to pay for all this? I haven't any money.
In book one of the first things that Hagrid does with the 11-year-old Harry is to take him to Gringotts Bank. In the book, Hagrid tells Harry that Gringotts is so secure that anyone would be mad to try and rob it. While this little line didn't make it into the movie, it is a big moment of foreshadowing because 6 books later in the Deathly Hallows, Harry, Ron and Hermione actually wind up breaking into Gringotts to free a dragon trapped within.
But there were 2, weren't there? Where's the other one?
Horcruxes are one of the most important parts of the entire Harry Potter saga, and long before we knew what they were, we saw one. That's right, in the Order of the Phoenix, while clearing out Sirius's house to make space for the Order, Harry stumbles across a locket that no one can open. Well, in the Deathly Hallows, it turns out that that locket had been a Horcrux all along.
Professor Dumbledore, sir?
In the very beginning of the first book, we read about a dark night on Privet Drive where Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall and Hagrid leave the newly orphaned Harry Potter at the Dursley home. Hagrid arrives on the famous enchanted motorcycle and Dumbledore asks where he got it. Hagrid casually mentions that a young Sirius Black lent it to him. Even though we had no idea at the time, this was the first mention of a character who would become more important than we could ever have imagined.
I'd like you to see it.
In The Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore begins to take Harry into his memories in order to teach him about Voldemort. One of these memories is the time when Dumbledore first met the very young Tom Riddle. In a very quick flash, we see 7 stones lined up on Tom Riddle's windowsill, foreshadowing the fact that he will eventually split his soul into 7 pieces, making him almost immortal.
7. Merlin's beard.
7 is a very important number in the Harry Potter series. It pops up over and over again. One of the creepiest ways that we never noticed was when Harry became the Quidditch captain. His jersey number is 7. This foreshadows the fact that Harry himself is the 7th Horcrux, and we all know what that meant.
I wonder.
When Harry first gets his wand from Ollivander, he learns that he and Voldemort both received wands with a phoenix feather core, the only 2 ever made. Ollivander tells Harry that
the wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter,
and hints that there might be a connection between Harry and Voldemort. But it wouldn't be until the end of the Goblet of Fire that we learn about the twin wands, and even later in the Deathly Hallows about just how important it is that the wand chooses the wizard.
After all that stuff you did in your books?
Books can be misleading.
You wrote them.
Oh, Professor Lockhart. So handsome, so full of lies. In the Chamber of Secrets, Gilderoy Lockhart becomes the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts, and everyone quickly realises just how fake his amazing stories actually are. Well, one clue hidden in plain sight in his office might have tipped us off earlier if we had noticed it. A wig, sitting right there on Lockhart's desk. While it's no big deal if he wants to wear one, it does indicate that he isn't telling the whole truth about who he really is.
I am Professor Trelawney.
Most people at Hogwarts don't take Professor Trelawney's predictions of the future all that seriously, but maybe they should. Especially considering that she actually predicted Dumbledore's fate way back in The Prisoner of Azkaban. In one scene in the Great Hall, Dumbledore stands up to invite Trelawney to sit with him and the 11 other people at the table. She declines, saying that the first person to stand up from the table of 13 will be the first to die, foreshadowing the fact that Dumbledore would meet that fate years later.
The ring of requirement only appears when a person has real need of it.
One of the most important rooms in Hogwarts has got to be the Room of Requirement, in which Harry, Ron and Hermione would put together Dumbledore's army during the terrible reign of Dolores Umbridge. Little did we know that Dumbledore himself had actually mentioned the room in passing way back in the Goblet of Fire, when he casually mentioned stumbling upon a bathroom that he was never able to find again.
Look, I don't know what happened tonight and I don't know why. It just did.
While no one guessed that Harry would wind up a Hogwarts champion in the Triwizard Tournament, it turned out that he and Ron actually guessed all of the tasks by chance, a year before they took place. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, they tire of their divination homework and start randomly throwing out ideas for what could happen to them in the future, including Harry suffering burns, being betrayed by a friend, and almost losing a big fight. Fast forward to the Goblet of Fire, and all of those things would happen to him for real.
The boy who lived, come to die.
We first encounter the mysterious and awe-inspiring centaurs in the Philosopher's Stone, when Harry is saved from Voldemort and Quirrell's attack in the Forbidden Forest by Firenze. After Harry leaves with Hagrid, another centaur named Bane tells Firenze that he shouldn't have interfered with the planet's intentions, which basically means he knew that Harry was supposed to meet his end in the forest. He just got the date wrong by about 6 years.
10 points to Neville Longbottom.
Many, many years after the gang's first year at Hogwarts, we would learn about Dumbledore's troubled past and relationship with his friend Grindelwald. And yet, at the end of the Philosopher's Stone, he gives us a hint about it, even if we had no idea at the time. When handing out points to determine who has won the House Cup, he gives 10 points to Neville Longbottom, because while it takes a great deal of courage to stand up to our enemies,
but a great deal more to stand up to your friends.
Something that Dumbledore would know a lot about.
Mysterious thing, time.
We don't often see members of the wizarding world interacting with parts of the Muggle world, but one instance of very clever foreshadowing does just that. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, when we see Harry at the Leaky Cauldron for the first time, we get a very quick glimpse of a man reading a copy of Stephen Hawking's book, A Brief History of Time. This little wink lets us know just how important time and time travel are going to be in the rest of this particular story.
Something I might have overlooked.
Even though the Deathly Hallows becomes something that is so important to Harry Potter that we can't imagine not being aware of them, it wasn't until the very end that we actually learn what they are. And yet, all the way back in the Goblet of Fire, we saw the famous symbol for the first time without even knowing it. Right before the final event of the tournament, when Dumbledore is speaking to Harry about Barty Crouch Jr., he looks into a glass case in his office and comes face to face with a statue of the Hallows. How's that for foreshadowing?
Every time I get close to an answer, it slips away.
There is so much hidden in these incredible books and movies. We could watch them 100 times and never catch it all. Did we miss your favourite moment of foreshadowing? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to keep up with the latest videos from The Things.